I am from the Spanish Embassy in Brasilia, and I'll be moderator of this panel, The Experience of Spanish Companies with PPP, our commitment to long-term commitment as a key to success in Latin America. Before introducing our panelists, let us talk a little bit about our context in our country. As you know, our Spanish companies are making a lot of investment in Latin America, and of course, for long term. And the companies started coming in since the 90s, and a large part of this effort has been channeled by means of concessions, infrastructure to modernize and manage essential services to those regions, either transportation, electricity, water treatment. Of course, those are investments in Colombia, Brazil, Central America, and Mexico and Brazil principally. And then I would like to extend a little bit more time since I am here. Brazil is one of the countries that has developed more interest in this concession model to reinforce the infrastructure and improve the quality of services provided. We also have in this country several examples that are important to quote, similar to the same sector and to what happened in Spain. We have the Line C in our metropolitan train in São Paulo, and with our participation, and that will be for 25 years, Arena. They also have the management of an airport hub in the northeast and in Spain. They operate with their own brand. And Avertis, they have a portfolio of more than 3,000 points that are invested. Of course, several infrastructure models in Spain, and it is impossible to talk about that in Brazil without talking about the experience we have in Spain. With no further ado, I would like to introduce you to some of our panelists that also have several experience examples. We have the transportation ministry in Spain, and for this type of agreement we have also the Association of Infrastructure State Society in the land transportation, SEITT, and also a SEOPAN and GLOBALVIA. With no further ado, I would like to pass the floor to Gonzalo Ortiz, who is the technical developer and the director of SEITT, of the Land Transportation Infrastructure State Company. Thank you very much, José, and thank you for the invitation to be part of this panel. I would like just in 5 minutes mention very briefly what we have learned in our experience in Spain, with the experience that we had with several concession agreements. And they were not exactly as we had planned initially. We think it is important to disclose to you all the lessons learned, and of course consider in the development of future projects in different countries in the region. In 2012, we had several, 8 as a matter of fact, licensees for our roads in Spain. And then we had several issues. First, we had another estimation of the demand of the traffic that we would have in those expressways or motorways, and they expected to have a certain amount as a result and some offer. As a matter of fact, those are new motorways. They were, of course, in a very complex network, very vulnerable, and with different alternatives for toll charging. And the second thing would be the creditors, and also the cost in terms of disappropriation. So we had to give that to the hands of the private sector for them to assume the this side of the contract. As a matter of fact, this was actually 6 times more expensive to what they had estimated before. So they estimated 400 million euros. As a matter of fact, the result was 2,400,000 euros on expropriation. The other cause that scared the creditors was the insolvency of this companies, of course, during the construction stage, due to new needs that appeared during the development of the project. After that, 6 years later, with creditors and several agreements between the authority and the concessionaires, the government in Spain decided that the society, SEITT, to be in charge of the service provided to the public and also the operation of those motorways. So what we have in SEITT in 2008, when we had in our hands the management of this whole set of assets, it was a very precarious situation in considering the conservation, the state of conservation of the motorways. And during these 15 years of exploitation and, of course, bad results, bad economic results, and, of course, those companies were not investing enough to keep at least the minimum expected when it comes to a concession agreement. So the conclusions that we draw from our administration side was that the experience that we had during those 10, 15 years with those 8 contracts are the following. First of all, I do believe that it was a very inadequate transfer of risks between public and private sectors, principally with regards to the risks that we were running, and then also the expropriation. In those assets, they were not very clear and visible, and in which you cannot estimate exactly what it is really enough, how this is going to behave in the future. This cannot be passed 100% to the private sector. This would basically give the results that we had. The same as per the expropriation. We believe and we learned that it is not convenient to transfer this expropriation in full from the public to the private sector, because the private sector cannot manage expropriations accordingly because of the cost they have to assume, and many occasions those depend on the decisions from the judiciary, and this is something that it cannot be given to the private sector. So it is not convenient to transfer that to the private sector. There was another lesson. With regards to those concession agreements, you have some anticipation payment. It is not clear. Sometimes there are a lot of controversies when you are quantifying the values. We have more than 10 years running this type of agreements, and we have not been able to quantify and to identify details and economic agreement with regards to litigation, anticipation, or responsibilities of the patrimony. And this is actually considered in our legislation, and it has to be clear what the amount would be, and that was already established in the law. And the quantifications after 10 years were not cleared enough, and things are still running around at the courts. So another lesson that I learned is that it is convenient to generate some sort of mechanisms in the agreement so that all companies, all concessionaires cannot just be in the hands of this bad economy. So they cannot just simply deny the public from the service that they have signed for. So there must be some sort of a trigger so that the investments are made accordingly from the private sector, but at the same time they cannot be affected in a negative way if things go wrong and sour in the economy. So those were the experiences that we had. So I'm not saying just the negative aspect of it. Of course, I'm just quoting here. I'm just mentioning that those were lessons that we learned and we should use as an example in other countries, and I think that they should be considered in the development of this kind of project in other countries. Thank you very much, Gonzalo, for your input. Of course, as a matter of fact, it is 20 to 25-year experience with those concessionaires, and of course, the initial design has to be changed. Of course, you cannot see everything that it is going to go sour 25 years before things happen. Of course, this is how important history is, and it is a lesson learned indeed. Now, let us just go back to more like Maria Moreno's aspect, and she is of SEOPAN's director. As a matter of fact, SEOPAN is one of the associations of constructors and concessionaires that are linked to the infrastructure in our country. Maria, you have the floor. José, thank you very much for your invitation, and I think it is extremely important to be part of this panel. So many thanks. About the initiatives, this is amazingly interesting. As we lived, we represent SEOPAN, and many of us know one another. But you know that SEOPAN is our association of construction and concessionaires, and we are dedicated to the construction and management of public infrastructures. We have 276 million euros in volume, 76% is international activity, and we are present in 60 countries. So for you to understand that our companies are not, of course, supposed to be mentioned here, but we are present. We count on several companies, Lequa, Exa, Robalis Hacer, and San Jose Group, and so those are international groups. So we have so many others. Anyhow, those companies and count on a great technical capability, and their systems are quite new in terms of innovation and technology, so they are in charge of several complex contracts, and they are referenced throughout the world in their sustainability and ability to deal with very hard issues, either social, economic, and environmental aspects. Many times, we associate our name to the environment, but of course I will also quote all those other aspects that I just mentioned. They are companies that are able to establish associations with local companies in the countries that they operate, and of course they are very competitive. Those Spanish companies have had a very important experience with regards to offer very complex solutions to complex, very good solutions to complex problems, and they are a reference. They have become international for that reason. We have been able to establish many good presences, important presences in the last 14 years. We're talking about large groups, yes. But in some cases, they have their construction aspect, they have the concessionaires, and some other cases, they are only concessions because of the type of operation, also in the investment made. If we talk about construction, I would say they are present in 80 countries, and their publication, they are on NER in the United States, they have 15% of the global construction market. They are very strong in North America and Latin America, and also European countries. With regards to the concessions, so today we are involved in the private management of main infrastructures in the world with assets in many countries. We are in North America, Europe, and Latin America more strongly, and much less in Africa and Asia, for obvious reasons. The experiences that our Spanish companies have had in the concessions of motorways as of the 60s were related to the interest in developing and expanding their network and also the typology of the projects, not only with regards to transportation but also social services and services. Now, with regards to infrastructures that are managed throughout the world, I would like to give you some data. With regards to transportation, we manage, for example, motorways in more than 25 million kilometers. There's also railroads, several kilometers, and we operate in more than 40 airports with a lot of traffic. With regards to infrastructure, transportation, so
la publicación. Un segundín porque estoy escuchando.
Sorry, it's
Okay, much better, thank you. Bueno, esto es en materia.
With regards to transportation infrastructure, not only the typology, they're operating. We have more than 10,000 places, and with regards to energy and so many kilometers in transmission and electricity, and also several million towers of telecommunications. So there's a lot of diversity with regards to typology and concessions. In addition, if we talk about services to our citizens, we provide services managing several hospital beds and also supply chains and supply networks in several thousand towns. And also residue treatment of to 90 million citizens. These are some of the data. As a matter of fact, we always, sometimes it sounds like we are only talking about the assets, but you can see that there's a gradual typology and there are several good experiences in Brazil.
Como sabéis, las PPPs o las...
So the PPPs have been promoted throughout the world as a solution for our to meet the needs of our private sector. As you see here in Latin America, the same thing is happening. In the last few years, these associations have become leaders compared to other regions. We have seen several very good examples with different typologies and different situations in terms of restructuring the services. Countries that where we are present, they have been made a lot of headway in the last few years based on previous experiences. So we can see, for example, examples quoted by Gonzalo of those experiences lived in Latin America. And based on those experiences, we
sobre presencia española en la región, pues serían algunos de los que ha mencionado José.
As José mentioned in the introduction, we also have the Line 2 and Line 4 in the metropolitan train in Lima, Peru, and also an investment in Marudo, Colombia, and also in Uruguay, So there are several treatment plants in Caracol plant in Mexico, for example, and also Bucaramanga, Barranca Bermeja in Colombia. This is a motorway, and also other motorways in Brazil, and some other roads in Brazil, and some motorways in Chile and in Costa Rica. So there are several examples of investments and experiences and presence in the region. We may say that in the last 6 years, there have been several projects with regards to concessions of Spanish companies in the region. 29-30% are basically related to projects in this region in Latin America. So there are several countries that provide a very good experience, and so the companies are interested in working and developing, some in less, some more, but we have been able to make headway in these regions.
Doy la palabra a Javier.
Now I would like to pass the floor to Martin Rivas, and he is from GLOBALVIA. And of course, they have been very present in Latin America. Javier, you have the floor. Thank you very much for this invitation, and thank you very much also for this beautiful work by PPP Americas. Of course, I wanted to share some of our experiences. Of course, we have worked a lot in our community, as Gonzalo mentioned, and Maria too. So we, as Spanish companies, I would like you to clarify who we are, and for you to understand our participation and what the investment criteria that we practice and what we could take as lessons learned. I would like to just explain that GLOBALVIA is a manager. We do not have anything to do construction just like others. We are long-term investors. So, of course, in most cases, we remain until the end of the concession term. We like long term, and this is part of our strategy, our operation. We work only in railroad and motorway. We have 21 motorways and 7 railroads. This is just in Spain. We have a very good defined focus on the parameters with regards to investment and technical aspects. We are present in many European countries, in Mexico, Costa Rica, United States, and Chile. Our focus in middle term is to expand the investment in countries such as Colombia and Brazil. Just for you to have an idea, the investments made in Latin America with 5 contracts in Chile, 1 in the United States, 1 in Mexico, 1 in Costa Rica, and the investment means 40% of our investments made in 50% of what it is done in the Latin American continent. So just to understand how we focus our work and our concession business. Now, I would like to explain to you what our vision is and the parameters that we need and the conditions of the market that we need for us to make an investment. This is how we analyze it from a strategic point of view. Historically speaking, the factors are not different from what we have today. How we made investments some time ago and now, criteria didn't change much. Perhaps certain aspects have changed, but not much. I heard from Gonzalo what the experience was that he had in other countries, but of course we know, and as we say in Spain, we always try to learn from the experience of those who are for long in this business. So the main criteria that we use is what conditions are established in the country so that we can make an investment. So we try to understand the potentials, the demand, so what we need to have a demand, of course, and we have to have growth. So there is a social need for the generation of infrastructure, and we come in to provide that. So this is something that takes us to the next step in the project. So we need to have this social demand and this push of the need from the population to use the transportation. So many corridors, but many countries don't have those providers or those suppliers, or they are not willing to make an investment. The second criteria, perhaps it is less important, but it is actually the juridical framework that has to be solid. There's no more complicated thing is when you have your agreement and your agreement cannot be met because of conditions or the juridical aspects and the variations, the rules change through in the middle of the way. So we have to count on this type of security. When we talk about the legal framework, I'm talking about the experience in solving conflict. In the end, many of the agreements have to be solved. And of course, counting on a very good and strong mechanism is a help. We have to have a pipeline that it is wide and robust, because many of the investors are trying, as a matter of fact, to enter a country and to become local, to be able to make more investments in different projects and to create a network, and so to enhance the management. It's very complicated to get to a country where there's no pipeline. So except from Costa Rica, so we are there because we have this huge panel of pipeline that it is available to all of us. So in both the primary and the secondary sector. So this is the third factor. So fourth fundamental factor would be financing. So of course, everything is leveraged. There is a huge amount of debt. So if there is this availability at a certain price and a certain level, and principally in local currency, that of course it would be much easier. It is very difficult to enter, say, in a region where finance does not exist. Then it would be harder. So we would be more like considering that type of situation. Some other countries do not provide a good return, and of course that aspect would be very important to consider, principally the trust that we have among sectors. Finally, there must be an ecosystem. When we talk about ecosystem of concessions, so we have to count on a network among providers and of course potential partners. This is what I mean. It is important to create associations so that we can exchange experiences in this sector, either by employees or administration personnel, not only for the management of the concessions, but also they have to learn and have to know how to sort out conflicts so that we can have a renegotiation of the agreements. So both parts have to know this world, how to manage this world, and of course the grantor has to know it as well. Generally speaking, those are the criteria that are needed to be able to be successful. Sometimes you have a good pipeline, but you don't have financing aspects, so that would be difficult, and the other way around as well. So in both are the criteria. This is not very different from what we in the sector are looking for. That is why this is our focus is in that. So just to close, I would like to explain that in the last 15, 18 years that we have had in Latin America and in the Americas as a whole has been very positive. All our experience has been positive. Of course, there were many ups and downs and crises, but our lessons learned are actually very strategic. One of the things, the key would be long-time investment. So if long-time investment allow you to have final return that is very aligned with those returns that we would initially expected to have. So of course we may have crisis in long period of time, but then we have time to recover. This is something like in Chile, and unfortunately in Mexico we haven't seen that so far. But the second would be how relevant a negotiation is, and those concession contracts are alive. They're not firm and unchangeable. This is part of this world. The renegotiation of the agreements is very important for all parties, for the managements, for the constructors, for the users, for the concessionaires or licensees. So it is important to be flexible. There are several examples. We have made $200 million to the in Chile, for example, the north access to the city, and so we implemented a free flow system, so generating a very good flow of traffic to the city, and this is part of the contract. So all of us know how important negotiation is. The key would be to have this capacity to renegotiate, and the third would be refinancing. This capability of refinancing project considers the adaptation to the current situation of the contract. Of course, in a lifetime, a lifespan of a contract, there are several variables that change all the time. And of course, there is an increase of demand, there are different situations, and of course, it is important to adapt to the new situation. It is essential so that we can leverage accordingly to offset risks and also with a good return to what we expected to have, and principally that this return is sustainable. Another criteria that I would like to say is the operation.